The Right Circle event in Chennai promises to be an interesting one because we have with us an iconic personality. We, as the Ehsas Women of Chennai, welcome you all to an exciting evening with Karen Anand, a legendary food writer, television personality, and restaurant consultant. She is considered a food guru in India and has played a huge role in influencing the way people eat and perceive of good food in our country. Ms. Anand will engage in conversation with Kaveri. Today's event has been organized by Prabha Khaitan Foundation in association with Kaveri by Kaveri Lalchand. The event is sponsored by our patron Shri Cement Limited. Before proceeding any further, allow me to say a few lines about the Prabha Khaitan Foundation, a non-profit trust based in Kolkata. Prabha Khaitan Foundation was founded by an eminent Indian literature, entrepreneur, philanthropist, social activist and feminist, late Dr. Prabha Khaitan, back in the 1980s. The essence of the foundation is the soulful amalgamation of the multicultural diversities of India. The philosophy of unity in diversity has been inspiring Prabha Khaitan Foundation to create boutique initiatives and activities that showcase the priceless literary and cultural assets of India for the past 4 decades. The Foundation's praiseworthy literary and cultural initiatives enjoy a global identity and a niche audience. Besides promoting literature, the Foundation celebrates the jeweled cultural heritage of India, thereby creating the finest experiences and cultural landmarks on the global map. The Foundation aims to encourage and widen the reach and readership of English literature to literary enthusiasts worldwide. Out of the prized literary initiatives, the Right Circle offers literary enthusiasts a golden chance to enjoy discussions on life, literary journeys, and the books of writers who write in English. The Foundation has an active presence in more than 40 cities in India and overseas. It enjoys the patronage of Shri Cement Limited and is ably assisted by distinguished associates, partners, and Ehsas Women of India in its effort to create a cultural capital. Today I am delighted to welcome Ms. Karen Anand and Kaveri Lalchand to our The Right Circle session in Chennai. Ms. Karen Anand was born in Bombay but grew up in London and studied in Paris. She has a degree from Sussex Universities and diplomas from the Sorbonne, École de Sciences Politiques and the École de Louvre in Paris. She returned to India in 1984 and decided to dabble in cooking, until then a hobby, which eventually turned into a path-breaking career. In the late 80s, unable to find a halfway decent European food outside of five-star hotel, she set up a salad bar, first in Pune and then in Bombay. Both were runway successes and the first of their kind in the country. This was the beginning of what was to be a life of extensive travel, visiting gourmet shops, markets and food fairs wherever she went. A prolific author with 20 books under her belt, she has also hosted the Good Food Guide, a 52-episode travel food show for Star TV, the first of its kind in India in 1995. Followed by Cook Na Kaho, Don't Call Me a Cook, also for Star TV. And a 12-part series on Mumbai restaurants for Trend Mill CNBC. Kaveri Lalchand is an Ehsas Woman of Chennai. She is a successful professional in her field of work and is an eager literature enthusiast. You can see from the beautiful creations of Kaveri all around us, this is what she is her passion. Kaveri, over to you.
Thank you, Vidya. Thank you everyone for being here. Welcome. Special welcome to you, Karen. It's a real honor and privilege to have you here in my store, and I'm happy.
Wearing your dress.
Very kindly. Thank you so much. That was really sweet of you. So I'm part of the Prabha Khaitan Foundation, and when they told us that they'd like us to host Karen in Chennai, I immediately said, can we do it in my store? Because for me, Karen is someone who I've known just like over the years, but we just keep meeting and we hit it off right away. And the kind of woman who I think is someone that I admire, look up to, and kind of woman I want in my store, just like all of you. So I was very keen that we do it here, and initially they said no, but then it all worked out. So here we are, and so Usually we give the books at the end of the talk, but I really wanted all of you to hold it in your hand and take a look and understand the kind of torment I went through when I was trying to flip through it to see what kind of questions I could ask her. Firstly, the photographs are absolutely gorgeous, and the stories are so captivating and so interesting. So we've all got a copy of the book. Karen Anand's book, Masala Mem Saab, tells culinary stories behind classic and lesser known dishes from Goa, Gujarat, Kerala and Maharashtra and West Bengal. And that's what makes this book so special from other just general recipe books. It tells culinary stories. So, Karen, what inspired you to approach this book from the... Actually, no, before I ask questions, just... Well, we're all flipping through it. So generally, it's a book of stories. You tell us general gist about what the book is about.
I think for India, you know, I've been an avid reader. I read cookbooks to go to sleep. You know, so I read recipes. I read things about. I'm reading one about the lemon right now in Italy, and you know, so for me, the narrative and the prose is almost probably more important than the recipe sometimes. So I felt really nobody had done it with Indian food. People either do prose, you know, some old grandmother where she lived, and it's very, very vernacular. And if you're, you know, there's one right now coming out about Kerala. If you're from Kerala or you know the family, or you know, then it's very interesting. Otherwise, it's told in a very kind of insular way. Or there are books by famous chefs in India which are pure recipe books. I'm going to say lots of daring things today, but one of them is that most of the male chefs that I've come across in India don't write. They can't even write a recipe properly, forget prose. You know, so they give you things and you do it and then you say, but hold on, there's cloves in there, but it's not in the, oh, I forgot that. Oh. So there was nobody. You know, there are a lot of writers abroad who have done this and done what I call a culinary memoir. I'll tell you some of them that I read if you're interested, but there was no one that had done it really of Indian food. And I felt, who else? You know, I've been in this industry a long time now, and I thought I needed to do it. So for me it was cathartic. I needed to do this kind of book which was both visual, because I think we're Indians, we like to see visual. And it's a mixture of pictures, of obviously not just of the recipes, but also to situate and to culturally situate each city. Because not all of us have seen all of India. My children always complain that they've seen cities abroad, but they don't know India very well. And so I think it's nice to know what that place looks like. What Maharashtra looks like, what Pune looks like, what you know, West Bengal, what Calcutta looks like, and that situates also not just food but the way we eat. And then thirdly, of course, is the recipes. So you have the prose, you have the visual, and you have the recipes, and hopefully you like all three. But if you don't, you have one or the other. So I have somebody who, a relative who says, I'm not interested in reading, but I like your recipes. So hopefully it'll appeal to everyone.
Oh, it certainly does. I mean, and interestingly, you put recipes third. So
Yes.
actually, she said prose, the visuals, and then the recipes, which I think may have been the process on how it came about.
No, actually, I had the recipes for the last 30 years. I've had some are really old recipes, especially the personal ones. Some recipes I got during. This is a COVID book, by the way, so it's a lockdown book. The challenge was not writing it because I was at home doing nothing, so that was great, and I just put everything together. The challenge was getting a publisher during COVID. And nobody wanted to touch a project like this, which was an expensive project because it's lots of color pictures and so on and so forth. And then luckily, Tista at Macmillan wanted a book like this, and she said, I think when lockdown is finished, people would want beauty. They want a big book. The only thing we did was we couldn't do a hardback, which we intended because of budget reasons. But actually, it works quite well, I think, as a paperback, because then I know somebody just bought 10 books to give as gifts, and they said, oh, I can carry them in my bag. Now, if they were hardback, it would be heavy. But that's the only compromise we made. So it was a challenge to get, there were lots of publishers, the top 5, everybody was interested. Harper said, oh, come back next year when we've sorted out all the other people that we put on the back burner. But Macmillan came through, and that was, really lucky.
So when was this book released?
It was released on, it was released on Amazon on the 1st of November, and then soon after there was a Goa Heritage Festival, and the organizers called me and said, would you release the book there? And I thought it was kind of apt, because it's the first chapter in the book. It's also My Heritage is Goan, so it kind of fitted. It kind of fitted. And then we did a launch in Delhi, and because the publishers are there. And then we did a launch in Bangalore because I went to the Lit Fest there. So this was the launch in Chennai.
And we are honored and we're very thrilled that you're here with us. We are lucky. So you had collected all these stories before? You had actually gone out and met the people? Because how did you pick and choose who you want to feature in the book? And did you get the recipes from them?
Yes. Usually I had the recipes, a lot of them already. And then I am blessed with a good memory of the distant past. I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I do remember something that happened 20 years ago. If I thought the recipe was good, or if that person was interesting, then I remember. So most of the time I wrote the recipe down with the person's name, and then I recalled the story behind it. And then wrote, in 2020 when I started, I wrote then all these little stories down. But usually the recipe linked the story. So it took very little time to actually write it all down. It took less than a year, it was 2020. But I have these recipes from the late 80s, some of them.
So you had these recipes. You had met the people who were in the book
Yes.
before.
Yes.
You had collected all their stories and all
Here and there, everywhere, yeah.
No, so this is now, I'm asking like as in from the process
Yes.
of putting it all together finally.
Yeah.
And then you said this was lockdown, so you compiled everything. And then when did you actually go out and take the photographs? Did you it must have been, this would have appealed to every aspect, the traveler in you, the nomad in you, the foodie in you.
Yeah.
What an exciting journey.
Remember lockdown, so no traveling. So what I did was the photographs of the recipes were taken by I couldn't get a photographer to Pune because no one could travel. If you remember 2020, I couldn't go anywhere. So what I did was I found this very sweet couple in Calcutta, and she said she would cook the recipes, and I gave her reference shots of everything. And her husband did the photography. They'd recently got into photography. They're bloggers and food bloggers. So some of the references, I give them very specific references, and they also had young children. So they would say, well, can we do this after 9 o'clock? And I would say, well, not really, I'm so tired now. But we had to work post 9 p.m. because of their young children, because their kids were not at school. Remember that? So we had to work post 9 o'clock, which was tough on me, not on them. And then I would send them references. I would do art direction via Zoom, all these kind of crazy things. The other pictures of the introductions, and a lot of them are personal pictures, and a lot of them are photographers. There is a fantastic place in Goa called the One School. And the director, Shantanu Shore, is an old friend. I said, you've got to have some nice pictures of Goa. I can't put holiday pictures in there that your students have done. And he said, yeah, I'll give them to you. And so he gave me fantastic pictures that his students had done in Goa, and so on and so forth. And every chapter, I remembered somebody. I write for the Telegraph in Calcutta. I do a monthly food or bi-monthly food and travel column for them. And so my editor said, I'm an amateur photographer. I said, really? He said, yeah, I go out at 6 o'clock every morning. I said, send me some of your photographs. And so he had fantastic photographs that I put in the West Bengal chapter. Yeah, so it happened like that. and people came along and were very happy to, because I had a budget for recipe pages to a point, but I didn't have a budget for photographs of the in the introduction. So we've made it a bit of a kaleidoscope. I mean, look at those are beautiful
I mean,
pictures.
those pictures,
Yeah.
each and every one of the pictures in the book are absolutely stunning.
So those are the ones we did together, the Zoom art direction by Zoom.
Yeah.
And then the ones in the, introducing the chapters, I put together like a sort of collage really.
But it's so interesting that how you happen to meet these people in Calcutta,
I know.
and they actually were, I mean, food bloggers who made the recipes.
Yep.
But then you never tasted them. They looked great.
No, because I
They
gave
looked
them
perfect.
Well, no, because I'd done the recipe already, and I knew the recipe worked, and I would give them a reference of my recipe or a picture that I thought was near. Yeah, I couldn't taste their recipe, but I tasted mine. So the difference also is that I'm a bit of a OCD person, and I tried. We had about 300 recipes, 250, 300. We eventually had to narrow it down to 110 or 120. And every single one is tried and tested. So I've tested all of these recipes.
Yeah.
Not obvious, because a lot of chefs and a lot of people who write cookery books don't. I will not name names, but there are people who don't. They do a copy and paste.
So that was what I was going to
Oh,
ask
yes.
you next, because you said some of the recipe books you have read. I mean, you find oversights where there's an ingredient here and not there, or there's no proper
Well, they don't
explanation.
explain. Exactly. They will say this particular ingredient, and you think, do they know what that is? It could be something simple like Sichuan peppercorn, but it's spelt wrong. So that makes me think. And then I see it on the net somewhere. Exactly the same recipe. Ditto, copied. So I think that happens.
Are you the kind of person who's cooking for large groups of people, or were you? Oh, I remember actually in your introduction when you were in Paris. That's how your food journey started.
Yes. I didn't cook
Food
at
adventure.
home. My mother was not a cook. My mother hated cooking. When she went she liked to eat, but not to cook. When she went from here, from Bombay it was Bombay then, to the UK or to London. The idea of London was great because she travelled with my father before, but the idea of living there and cooking every day was to her just a chore. Poor woman hated it. And so I didn't really learn anything about food from her, unfortunately,
Not one
except
of those romantic stories.
No,
where
no
you
romantic,
learned
no romance.
Watching your grandmother.
My grandmother was a great cook. Both were, but I never knew them growing up because they were here and I was there. But my maternal grandmother, I have a couple of her recipes in the book, which we didn't get from her, by the way, which is another thing, because she didn't think that anybody should have her recipes, including her daughter or her granddaughter. So I wasn't into food at that time, I was too young. So we got the recipe from her cook, or her maid, not really a cook even. And then she said she only spoke Konkani. So she told my mother in Konkani. Now my mother, not being a cook, sort of said, oh, she puts a handful. I said, oh, thanks. So I kind of did, like the prawn balchao is a labor of love, because I did that like 7 times to get it correct. And that's a lot for me. Usually I get it right in the second or third time. But that took ages because it was a handful of this and a pinch of that. And then I think the taste is absolutely what hers was.
I was just looking at the process. You've broken it down. I read a couple of the recipes. She's made things very simple.
Hopefully easier.
Very easy. There is no ambiguity, because there's a lot of times when I read recipe books, it doesn't really, I mean, you're a bit confused by the end of it, and then you're just trying to improvise. And the whole point of following a recipe is because you want it to taste authentic, or you want it to taste like it's supposed to be, that experience.
Well, some of the recipes are really simple. Especially Maharashtrian, Maharashtrian cooking by and large, except those complicated mutton dishes from Kolhapur or Vidarbha or something. But otherwise, your Puneri Brahmin food of every day is very, very simple.
And the ingredients are
very
easy to
simple,
source.
very easy to get. So most of the recipes are like, but there are a couple. If you're Gujarati and you want to do an undiu, I cannot do a Gujarati chapter without undiu, right? So, there are so many cousins of my husband's who live in Boston and they want to do undiyu in winter. I'm like, okay. And they get everything from the Gujarati stores. Everything's available. And so, yes, I had to have one of those, I had to have a nihari because, it is a fantastic, nihari is a fantastic Lucknowi dish, undoubtedly. So, and also I had done it in my first project in London, which was a restaurant called Dishum. I had a chef. Yes, I helped them with the book. I was their consultant on the first one. It's a lovely book. And so my chef Navid, who's a corporate chef now, was ex-ITC. And ITC in those days, I think still today, does a great job with Indian food. And then they had Qureshi and they had his whole band of followers. So they had written down and kept some amazing Lucknowi Abadi, old real Mughlai food recipes. And so the nihari is complicated. It's not an easy thing, but there's maybe about 7 or 8 of those in the book.
No, but you mentioned that you had to have this recipe, you had to have the undiyo, you had to have. So how did you pick and choose? You had 300.
Yeah.
And then you whittled it down to 150, which is still a lot.
Yeah.
And
120. Yeah.
120. And some are easy, simpler. I like that you've got a balance of easy to throw together and some slow cooking recipes. So how did you pick and choose?
Well, I looked at a chapter. Let's look at Goa, and we said, okay, somebody who's new to it, or even Goans, second generation. Now people don't cook so much. They don't have mothers and grandmothers at home, or they live in New Zealand or whatever. There are some, you have to have a vindaloo in there, right?
Yes.
For sure. I resisted the shakuti and all that because that's not so easy. But a vindaloo is, you have to have a prawn curry in there. You have to have a fish reshad in there. So you have to have those 3 or 4, I think, which are sure shot. I'm living in New Zealand or, wherever, Vancouver, and I want to make something that, I've had in Goa or that my mother cooked or whatever. So those 3 or 4 you have to have in every chapter. And then the rest, I just had fun. I just looked at recipes I had from those places and thought, well, that's a nice home style recipe. So it went like that. It went, I would say 60-40. 60 on home style and 40 on must have. And then, of course, there's a chapter called Memorable Meals, where there were dishes on Parsi food, Sindhi dishes. So I didn't have enough to warranty a full chapter. So I put them in memorable dishes because they usually have a fun story behind them.
Yeah, I was very happy when I reached that to the end. Because you've got, in this book, it's Goa, Gujarat, Kerala, Maharashtra and West Bengal.
Yes. 5, yeah.
5 states. So why these 5 to start with?
These are the states that I know.
Yeah,
these are the states I know and that I know well. And you see something like Sindhi food or Parsi food, there's no state. You can't put Parsi into Bombay because there are Parsis everywhere. You can't put Sindhi into Bombay because there are Sindhis everywhere. So I thought memorable meals is nice because there are stories. So there's Parsi, there's Sindhi, of course. There is some dishes I had in Ladakh because I went to Ladakh thinking I'm not going to eat for a week.
There's Kashmiri food.
There's some Kashmiri. There's Coorg. There's Chennai, of course. There's a famous chicken 65.
Yeah.
But the chicken 65 is very interesting. It's not like the chicken 65 you will probably get here as a street food. It's a chef I met in Coorg. And he made this chicken 65 one evening where I said, we've eaten enough, can't eat anymore. No, I'll send you something with drinks. And he sent this chicken 65 and we finished the whole plate. It was very interesting because he marinated everything and then he just put the chickpea, the besan batter and he fried it. He didn't refry it with the dahi and the curry patta and all of that. It was all in the marination and then it was his recipe. And then he deep fried it. And I make that in Italy, I make it in England. Everyone's gaga over it and it works really well. So when you bite into
all
it,
the vegetarians here, you don't know what
but you can make a cauliflower 65, which I do. In my new restaurant now called Colonel Saab in London, we make a cauliflower 65 and it works very well. There you are. Okay for vegetarians. Did you look at the Sindhi recipes at all?
Yeah, I saw dal pakwan.
There's dal pakwan. One of my neighbors used to make that. Yes, there is the Sindhi mutton. There's methi machi. Now that methi machi is what we used to make at home. Oh, you did. But some people make it differently. But that's the way we make. We used to make methi machi. And then you have to have the methi machi. I think I didn't put in sale double roti and sale mani. I don't think I put those in. But that's another next book.
Yes, so the next book, are we covering, this is pretty much the breadth of India.
Yes.
You've got
there's
from
no
Goa to Calcutta.
Yeah, there's no Punjab. There's no
what
Delhi.
happened to North and real South? You've gone to Kerala.
I kind of thought, I think subconsciously, I felt the North has been done to death. And I think it has, only because a lot of our restaurateurs are Punjabi. So it's been done to death, right? We've had enough of tandoori chicken in its 20 forms. We've had enough of the biryani. It's been done. I put a South Indian biryani in there from Kerala, but I've not put a Mughlai biryani. So I kind of thought it'd been done, and plus I don't have the kind of knowledge of UP and MP as I did of the other states. Those are states which I traveled to often for work, and so I would make at least 10 trips in 2 or 3 years. So they're states that I know, and therefore I put them in. I don't have that kind of knowledge of Madhya Pradesh or Oriya food or UP, which is why I didn't do it. But Delhi, I do know well. I just didn't want to put it in.
Sorry, I'm glad that you didn't, because these the cuisines that you covered are more interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
Like you said, the North Indian Mughlai food has been done a lot, and but this is also very interesting because even overseas, I think in the bigger cities overseas, the non-Indians now know the difference between food from Kerala and food from the North.
Oh, just. They talk about the UK and everybody knows about Indian food. No, they don't. They still want... that's the curry restaurants.
In the bigger cities,
London is different.
They moved beyond the Balti chicken.
They've definitely moved beyond the curry house and the Balti chicken. But in Colonel South, for example, I have put in a doodh march from West Bengal. They came, what's that? You have to really still educate people. And I want to do a lot with South Indian food. They still think it's only dosa. That's South India. South India's dosa and idli, and they don't like idlis. Generally the Brits don't like idlis. They find it a bit spongy, and they don't understand idlis. They don't like the texture. They don't like kind of ras malai. Anything that's sort of spongy, they don't understand. So we had some issues but we've kept in, for example, I've done an Andhra Pulusu curry, but I do it without the fish. I do it with bengan, with little baby bengan, and it works very well. It's really delicious with bengan. Try it, because bengan takes very well to something a bit sour. So they like that. I've done quite a few things with South Indian. South Indian they take to quite well. But other things like West Bengal, there weren't really too many Bengali dishes. Anjan Chatterjee's opened a restaurant called Chaurangi. So he's finding it difficult to sort of get people to accept, food of West Bengal. Not all Bengali food, but food of West Bengal. So it'll take another 10 years at least, but it's on its way. Yeah, people are open to other Indian things.
Yeah, but there is a Sri Lankan restaurant in London.
Yes, Hoppers.
Yep,
It does very well.
Really,
but remember,
well,
it's 40 seats.
Yes,
I keep telling people it's not expensive. It's 40 seats, fantastic location, and it's spicy. I found it really spicy, didn't you?
Sri Lankan food is spicy.
Yeah. No, but I mean they haven't toned it down. They made it quite asleep, and it does very well. Yeah.
So, talking about going to restaurants, many times when we travel, I remember when I was younger, and I would open a menu and see all these names and words and terms and techniques which I didn't understand, and I just for fear of not looking I would order the wrong dish. Has that ever happened to anyone? Did you order the wrong dish, or you've got something and it's not what you thought it was,
and you paid a lot of money for it.
and then you're just eating it and it's so nice, but actually
You hate it.
we hate it. So, do you have any advice? Like, how do we get around that?
It's a tough one. I think that's why a lot of Indians who travel, not Indians, anyone, first go to a buffet. Because at least on a buffet you can taste something. It may not be the best example, but you can taste something. You don't like it. So I think a buffet is not a bad idea to start, your venture with food. And then I think, a lot of it is just hit and miss, you're right. But if you could try, I think a lot of people are very shy about asking the waiters, what is this? Yeah, well then you're plucky, but not everyone is. And chefs in Europe often don't come out. So you're reliant on a waiter who speaks English. And that's another difficult one. So I think the only thing to do is go to smaller restaurants first and try and make friends with a waiter. And try and say, this is something, I'm vegetarian, or I'm this, or I'm that. The other thing with vegetarianism, it's not only vegetarian, but is that in Italy, for example, I worked with a Cipriani for a while, and the chef would say to me, "Oh, Karen, I've got some board member coming from whatever it was, from the Belmondo group or whatever, and he's Indian and he's vegetarian. What do I give him?" I said, "Well, give him all your, give him burrata. Oh no, but that's not vegetarian." I said, that's vegan. What you're talking about is veganism. So they don't understand, because there wasn't a word for veganism in Italian earlier. So vegetariana was both. It was vegan, vegetarian, something they didn't want to talk about. So it was one of those dark horses in the corner of the room. And they thought vegetarian meant no milk product. So when I told him that this man is vegetarian, not vegan, actually a South Indian, he was a CFO, and he was very happy with tiramisu and with burrata and with mozzarella, and so he said, then I'm done, I'm okay. So I think it's very important to, if you have dietary restrictions, to make it clear what you can eat as opposed to what you can't eat. They're usually quite nice. And in the non-veg, if you don't eat pork, or you don't eat beef, or you don't, because of course they eat everything in the West. And in the East, that's even worse. I find Thailand is like, oh my God, or China. I mean, they eat, I'm sorry about the people who are vegetarian, but really everything in the animal. Everything. Beetle, cockroach. And fish is the fruit of the sea. So they won't understand until you make it. And also, I have cousins, Gujaratis by the way, who eat fish. And because they call themselves Californian Gujaratis. So they eat fish. They eat, so, I would be there slaving, making these great vegetarian meals. And one day, my younger son must have seafood at every meal. And so I made fish for him and I put him somewhere else. And they said, well, why are you giving him fish and not us? And I said, because you're vegetarian. Oh, no, but we eat fish. I said, thank you for telling me after 6 years, So. Oh, you really?
Bengali vegetarians. Bengali.
Well, of course. And in fact, what is very interesting with Bengali vegetarians is they don't often put ginger and garlic and onion because they're Vaishnava, but they eat fish. It's like the Kashmiris, who eat lamb, but don't put prawn or onion or garlic in their dishes, but they eat the lamb.
So, coming back to the stories of the people,
Yes.
because I find that so interesting in a recipe book. I love to have a little peek into other people's lives, So, is there something that's very memorable that you'd like to share with us, or something that?
Well, that's my grandmother's one, which I told you. Nobody could get that recipe now. That's very precious. There were people like, the great chef Qureshi. I was interviewing him for a program, and he was making these complicated recipes. Of course, with 10 slaves around him, everyone's, cutting and chopping, and he's standing there. And I said to him, listen, it's the end of the day, I'm tired now. Is there a Lucknow recipe which doesn't require 32 ingredients and a week of my time trying to get the ingredients from rose petals and something and dagad pool? And I said, really, there must be surely you don't eat like this every day. And he said, we have something called kenchi kebab. And it's in the book. And I said, kenchi. And he said, yeah, kenchi. And I said, how do you... He said, when we make pasanda at home, and we bash the mutton really thin, or the chicken, we have left over. So we don't know what to do with it. We put this garam masala, and out of his back pocket, I'm not kidding, comes a little vial of garam masala. Now, that is his garam masala. Of course he didn't give me the recipe. I kind of smelt it, and I kind of felt, he said there were 22, 23 ingredients. I kind of got 15, I didn't go beyond that. But anyway, he's not going to tell me. So he takes out this garam masala, which is fantastic, very aromatic, puts it on the chicken, and then just put ginger garlic paste, quick, little bit of green chili, quick. Put it into some besan and fried it. It was divine. You don't even need a chutney with it because it's so good. So that is kenchi kebab. It's really quick, and since you've already flattened the chicken or the mutton, it's kind of tender. And it cooks fast, and you could make. So that was a fun recipe. We were talking about Anand Chatterjee, and he said to me once, "Oh, you have to have my." You know how people who have restaurants have my malai chingri is different from everybody. I said, "Oh, really?" And he said, "Look, I'll come and show you." I said, "But I live in Pune." So then he didn't know what to say because the male ego took over, So he said, "I said I live in Pune and we're in Bombay." He said, "I'll come. I'm coming next weekend." I said, "Okay," and I honestly thought he wouldn't come, and he did. He came with his two guys. He drove down to Pune and he made me his malai chingri in my home. Yeah, so these sort of things were quite precious. There are lots of stories like that, but those sort of things were quite precious, and I think those are real memories for me.
Now in India, you pretty much have documented the whole change in the way people eat in India. From the ingredients that are available now and to basically the exposure on the palate. I mean, you have young children who are at 6-year-old, 7-year-old children who say, "What do you want to eat?" "I want to eat sushi." And that was something that, I remember I ate my first sushi when I was much older, and that was not in India. So, you've seen the whole journey of Indian eating, and do you have any thoughts, anything about that?
I think we must keep our tradition. That's important. So even if there's no grandmother in the house or mother, hopefully books like this will, you must keep a few things that you do that are because later on your children are going to give it back to you. And they'll say, "How come you never cooked this for us when we were younger?" Or "How come they're terrible children, they wag the finger." And both my boys said they don't want children. They both got they're both married and they don't want children. And I said, "Well, okay, easy for you, not so easy for us." So I think a little bit of tradition you have to keep. I think tradition also, there's this whole debate about tradition, authenticity. I think it does change a little bit. Sale mani, if you make today, or sale double roti, everyone, "Oh God, look at the white bread going in." They're delicious, but they're all white bread, Well, yeah, we didn't have brown bread in those days, right? It doesn't taste the same. A white bread, what we call the Bombay sandwich, with tomato and cucumber and beetroot and cheese and chutney, and then it's grilled. It doesn't taste the same if you do it without that white plastic wrapped bread. It has to be the white plastic wrapped bread, right? So I think a little bit of tradition you have to keep. And we all said, my children are like that as well. When they were little, I had a catering company. My elder one is still quite traditional, but the little one used to sit on the ota, in the kitchen and eat whatever I was cooking or I was experimenting with. So he grew up eating caviar and eating, prawns and eating all sorts of things, and he thought it was normal. And I would, send him off to play dates, and I'd get a woman calling me in a complete state, saying, "I've made pasta, and your son is asking for pecorino. What is pecorino? Is it a place, a name?" So, because he thought it was normal. He had it at his house, and he thought every house would have it. He wasn't trying to be snobbish or whatever. He just thought everybody has pecorino. So I think on the one hand, we want to educate our children to, about different things. There's so much that's available. It's a cheese that comes from southern Italy, more Romana, and it's made It's like Parmesan. Parmesan is made out of cow milk, and Pecorino is an aged cheese made in the same way as Parmesan, but with sheep milk.
Not like blue cheese.
No. It's just an aged cheese. So, for example, if you're doing a real carbonara, which is a pasta made with, with guanciale, it should be a cheek, but it's often with bacon and no cream, and with egg yolk and with cheese and butter. It's usually, traditionally, pecorino. I find it a bit strong because it's cheap cheese, so it's quite strong. But I use Parmesan. But pecorino is traditional. So yeah, these are good questions, because you hear them, and if you don't know, how do you find it? Well, today we've got Google, which does help. You do, but now the government recently has stopped the import. I think pecorino as well. It stopped the import of Parmesan because somebody sitting in Delhi has found out that it's made with animal rennet. Now, animal rennet is a byproduct. It's not. There's no animal in there. It's a byproduct of of something, which I won't tell you because it's a bit. But it's a byproduct of the animal, and it's then extracted, and that is a starter. Like we use, curd or a khatta, any kind of lemon to sour for paneer. So it's a starter. But they found out that it's animal rennet, and so now we are not getting Italian Parmesan. I'm saying Italian because I think the Germans also make a variety, something like that. Can't be called Parmigiano. But Parmesan Pecorino comes under the animal rennet thing. So we're not going to get asleep anymore for a while anyway, till this government is there. Until the next IAS officer decides he's going to change the law.
I just want to bring to notice that did you realize that when she started talking about the recipe and slowly talking about this, how to make that's the carbonara, and she went into the cheese and the butter, she went into a little bit of a
Lots of butter.
you could see that it was coming out from was a momentary lapse in
I just remembered how much butter it
presence
was.
here.
Almost taste.
Yeah,
Oh,
we were
good.
like floating.
Well, next time we do something, we'll do a little demo as well. Yeah.
So I read somewhere that sometimes you don't like to be called a chef.
Not at all. I'm not a chef. I haven't worked 15 years at the grill as chefs have done. I mean, chefs work very hard, and they endure a lot of really bad behavior in kitchens, and there's a hierarchy that is terrible. I worked in a Japanese kitchen for a few days and saw a chef throwing knives, not at me, somebody else. So it's a tough place, and I haven't done that. I've worked very hard, but not in a kitchen. And I feel, wherever I needed to learn something, I went to a Michelin restaurant, I found a chef that would be happy to have me in his kitchen for a few weeks. I did something else. So I'm really a home cook that's learned wherever I can if I found I had a gap. But for example, a bakery, I don't bake. I've started baking about maybe 7 or 8 years ago because I never had a sweet tooth. And so neither did my children, because I didn't give them sweets, because I didn't, I did make cheesecake, and we made some cheese
I remember in
CAC, yes. But it was mainly savory, if you remember. There was the ham, there was the hummus, but I did do cheesecake, yeah. Cheesecake I did because somebody must have liked it in the family. But I didn't bake till fairly recently. I still don't. I make like 6 things that I can bake, But no, I'm not look at those poor people who slave for so many years. What I find very interesting now on Google or, Instagram, there are these young girls who've done a 3-month or a 4-month cordon bleu course, which they paid to do. And it's not like they've had an exam or anything. And then they come back to India and they're chefs. I'm like, you did, 3 months you become a chef. Wow, You don't call yourself a chef, but they do on Instagram. I met a couple of these girls. They're very good. They post every day. And I met two of them. They take a lot of pictures of themselves as well as their dishes. But they're amazing. They work really hard and that they post, a dish every day. But the chef, that I don't agree with.
So you first started cooking when you were in Paris, and you were making
Yes.
Indian food for your friends.
I was doing Indian food for my friends, and I learned French food in the family I lived with. They had a nanny. I was very, very fortunate.
And then you came to India, and
Yes.
you realized that you couldn't get a decent continental. And then
Continental.
What do you want, Indian or Conti?
You could get Conti. You could get Conti in the Taj.
Yeah.
You go to the
get
Taj.
Conti. So when you came to India when you could either get Indian food or Conti food.
Yes.
When Conti meant anything not Indian. No, okay, so there was Chinese. No, Indian, Chinese or Conti. Right?
Yes. And Conti usually meant something
That's
with,
what we had.
yeah,
in
something
India.
with white sauce or that
Conti.
kind of.
Conti, baked vegetable Conti.
Yes.
So you came. So you went in Europe. You were doing Indian food. You came to India, and then you started doing European food, and that's what That's what you were famous for a long time. And now you come
Indian.
to full circle, and now you are the masala mensa. So we were saying you don't call yourself
No,
a chef.
I always did Indian food at home, but I just thought there's so many Indian chefs out there. How can I compete? I mean, there are still so many, but now I realize as I got older that they're not all doing home style food. They're mostly doing restauranty kind of food.
And the trend now is towards home style.
I think so. I think the trend is home food, sourcing locally, that's very important. Seasonal, which is what Europe had, it still has, in France and Italy. Italy, I don't think, has great cuisine. They're not skillful. They just have great produce. But someone from, like this pecorino business, someone making it in Rome, will use pecorino. And if I make it in Venice, where I go quite often, they'll say, oh, we don't use pecorino. Why are you buying pecorino? They use Padano, because it's local to them. And that's how they do it. So they don't do it because it's an authentic recipe to Rome. They feel Rome is hot and it's different kind of people, and and they do what suits them and their palate. In the north, they don't use garlic. Yeah, in Venice, they don't use garlic at all.
And that you find that odd in Italian food.
Yeah, exactly, because we're so used to this pizza pasta thing,
Pizza. So, masala mensa. Thank you very much. I know that we could sit here and go on, and everybody would share their own food stories. But I'm
But
sure
if there are
we
any
have
questions,
Yes, I'm sure we have some questions now. Okay.
Because I didn't want to call myself a chef or a cook, and I thought that's what I do. Well, it was that or Mistress of Spices, but that was done already. Yeah, that would be a different picture on the cover, I think. Maybe it would sell the book more.
You mentioned Cipriani and maybe Daniel. What's the perception of Indian food in places like that? Those kind of hotels?
Oddly enough, when I was working with the chef to create new menus, he said, what would Indians like here? And I said, honestly, they want Italian food. They don't. I could have got myself a job very easily creating Indian dishes for them. But I don't think people who stay at €1,000 a night hotel, Daniele or Cipriani or Gritti or really want to eat Indian food. They've come to eat truffles and to eat the best of what's in Venice. Yeah. So I said to him, no, I said, if somebody really wants an Indian dish, give me a call. We'll do something. But he never had that. I said, don't try. And they got me in to see if there was a need. But I don't think there was really a need. Their perception of Indian food, they don't understand Indian food.
But that's in hotels like that.
Yeah, really something. In fact, I do. In fact, I'll get a hold of Kaveri next time. I have a little thing that I do. I take groups of mainly women on little tours to Europe and wherever. And we call it culinary focus, but it's not really just culinary. It's art, it's culinary, it's shopping, it's small tours. So we did Italy, My partner for this was is in Calcutta, so she gets the people. So we did Italy, and it was very successful. And a lot of them were vegetarian, and it worked very well. But if there's anyone interested, the next time I do it, we did Uzbekistan, which was fun. I'll ask Kaveri for all your numbers. My little culinary tours. Yeah, but it's not all culinary. I mean, Uzbekistan you can't do culinary, but it's interesting because I do these little tours. I'll let you know when I'm doing the next one. Obviously, it's a gap of 3 years.
Karen, I have a question.
Sure.
When you travel and come home, what's your comfort food?
Dal chawal.
Dal chawal for the
Dal
winter.
chawal or aloo. I love aloo matar. I must have been in Punjabi in my last life.
And then if you
I
had
do
some-
aloo matar and anything with rice. Actually, I'm a rice eater. I'm not a roti eater.
For me, it's also Thai sadam.
Yeah, there you go. That's something I also love. Yeah, actually, I do.
Thai sadam.
Yeah, it's not fancy food at all.
Any more questions? I mean, we can resume.
Thank you, Kay. And Karen, thank you very much. Your approach to your work is full of passion, and your achievements are monumental, to say the least.
Well, I'm old now.
Engaging, it was a pleasure to hear you talk about your journey with food and through various countries. It was fascinating, and I wish we could go on a little longer, but I think we're restricted a little bit with time. And so on behalf of the Prabha Khaitan Foundation, we'd like to express our deepest gratitude to you and to Kaveri, and for Kaveri for hosting this event, and also to ITC for having provided us this wonderful food, the tea and the coffee and the snacks. It's open, so after this, you're welcome to go back to the table and graze some more. A big round of applause for our amazing audience of Chennai. Without your support, none of our events would have been successful. Thank you for being here and being most receptive. I would like to request Ms. Kumudini Yogaratnam, CEO, Country Manager of Bank of Ceylon, to please present a memento of the beautiful shawl from Prabha Khaitan to Karen Anand. This is a Madhubani shawl which has been sent to us from Calcutta especially.